There comes a time in every person's life when the noise fades and you find yourself alone with your own thoughts. It can feel uncomfortable at first, the silence, the stillness, the absence of familiar voices. Yet within that quiet lies a force that few truly understand. Solitude is not a punishment. It is the birthplace of clarity, transformation, and inner strength. The power of solitude reveals itself only to those brave enough to stop running from themselves. Most people spend their entire lives surrounded by distraction. They seek constant company, endless conversation, and external validation because the thought of being alone terrifies them. But this fear hides a deeper truth. They do not fear loneliness, they fear facing what lies within. Solitude strips away the noise and shows you what you've been avoiding. It places a mirror before you and says, "This is who you are, unfiltered and unseen." In solitude, every emotion you've suppressed begins to surface. The unresolved pain, the forgotten dreams, the voice of intuition, all come rushing forward. At first, it feels like chaos. You begin to see your flaws, your insecurities, your masks. But if you stay long enough, something extraordinary happens. The noise within begins to settle. The chaos begins to organize itself. You start to hear the quiet whisper of your own truth. That whisper is the voice you have been seeking through others for years. When you are surrounded by people, your energy is constantly scattered outward, adjusting, reacting, performing. Solitude pulls your energy back home. It reconnects you to your center, to the space where your true power resides. It teaches you that peace does not come from the approval of others, but from alignment with your own being. The moment you stop searching for belonging outside and start cultivating it inside, you stop being a follower of the world and start becoming the creator of your path. Solitude is where the soul breathes. It's the sacred space where your spirit can stretch without judgment. When you spend time alone intentionally, not as isolation, but as connection, you begin to rediscover your own rhythm. You notice how the mind slows down when there's no one to impress. You begin to observe your thoughts instead of becoming trapped by them. You start seeing patterns in your life that were once invisible. You realize how often you've betrayed your intuition for the sake of acceptance. Solitude awakens the awareness that was buried beneath the noise. It is in solitude that creativity is born. The greatest works of art, philosophy, and innovation have emerged from those who dared to stand apart. They listened to the silence until it began to speak. They understood that solitude doesn't isolate you from life. It deepens your participation in it. When you withdraw from the external world, you enter a dialogue with the unseen. Ideas begin to bloom, visions become clear, and inspiration flows freely. The outer world often distracts you from the deeper wisdom that already exists within. Solitude clears the path to access it. But solitude isn't always peaceful. It demands confrontation. It forces you to see the shadows you've been avoiding. It reminds you that healing doesn't happen in a crowd. It happens in stillness. The moments when you feel most alone are often the moments right before transformation. The discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something new is emerging. The self you once were is dissolving to make room for the self you are becoming. The world often praises connection and community, and rightly so. But no connection is meaningful unless you first establish one with yourself. Without solitude, relationships become a way to escape rather than evolve. Solitude teaches you emotional independence, the ability to love without attachment, to give without losing yourself, to be surrounded by people and still be grounded in your own presence. When you learn to stand in solitude, you stop fearing separation. You realize that being alone doesn't mean being empty. It means being full of your own presence, your own thoughts, your own essence. You stop begging for attention because you've discovered the satisfaction of self-awareness. You stop chasing company because you've learned how to sit with your own soul. You stop waiting for someone to save you because you've met the only one who can. The self that has always been there, patiently waiting for your attention. Solitude is not a retreat from the world, it's a return to your inner world. It's the place where you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. It teaches you to stop fearing silence and start listening to it. Because within that silence lies guidance, insight, and strength far greater than anything external could ever offer. The power of solitude is not about isolation, but integration. The process of becoming whole within yourself, so that when you step back into the world, you do so from a place of inner authority, peace, and authenticity. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize that no one else can walk their path for them. Friends may offer comfort, mentors may provide direction, but in the silence between decisions, only one voice remains, your own. That voice, often ignored or doubted, is the foundation of your strength. The journey towards self-mastery begins when you stop seeking rescue from the outside and start cultivating the presence of your inner ally. The inner ally is not some external guide or mystical presence. It is the part of you that remains steady when the world shifts. It is your internal compass, the voice that whispers, keep going. When everything around you screams, give up. Many never meet this part of themselves because they have been trained to rely on approval, permission, and validation. They spend years looking for someone to tell them they are enough, not realizing that the approval they seek has been waiting quietly within them all along. When you have no one cheering for you, no one understanding your struggle, and no one acknowledging your effort, the temptation is to break down. But that is precisely the moment when the inner ally begins to awaken. It doesn't appear through comfort. It emerges through necessity. When external support disappears, the self must learn to become its own source of strength. That's the turning point between dependence and personal sovereignty. The inner ally doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't flatter or deceive. Its language is calm, steady, and honest. It will tell you when you're wrong, but it will also remind you that mistakes are not failures. They are feedback. It will push you to take responsibility for your choices, but never drown you in shame. The inner ally is not there to protect your ego, it's there to protect your growth. Most people are familiar with the voice of their inner critic, the harsh, judgmental presence that reminds them of every flaw. But the inner ally is the counterbalance to that critic. Where the critic says, "You're not enough," the ally says, "You can learn." Where the critic says, "You failed again," the ally says, "You're still in the process." The critic drains you, the ally builds you. The challenge is learning to recognize which voice you feed. Developing an inner ally requires honesty and patience. You must learn to listen to yourself, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Ask, "What do I need right now?" instead of, "What's wrong with me?" Replace self-punishment with self-inquiry. The more you practice this, the stronger your inner ally becomes. It starts as a whisper and grows into a guiding force, one that leads you through darkness without fear. The world often celebrates external power, success, influence, recognition, but true power is internal. It is the ability to remain centered when nothing goes your way. It's the quiet resilience that keeps you grounded while others lose their balance. The inner ally is the root of that resilience. It doesn't promise that life will be easy. It teaches you how to remain unbroken when it isn't. Every time you choose self-respect over people-pleasing, you strengthen your inner ally. Every time you honor your boundaries, instead of betraying them for approval, your ally grows louder. Every time you get up after disappointment, you deepen your trust in it. This relationship with yourself is not built in comfort. It's forged in the fires of struggle. There will be moments when you doubt yourself so deeply that you'll want someone else to make decisions for you. You'll want someone to confirm that you're on the right path. But the truth is, no one outside of you can ever truly know. They can advise, they can guide, but the final choice, the step forward, must always be yours. The inner ally gives you the courage to take that step, even when uncertainty surrounds you. When you begin to depend on your inner ally, loneliness transforms into solitude, fear transforms into clarity. The absence of support no longer feels like abandonment, but opportunity. You realize that every challenge is a conversation between your higher potential and your current limits. Your ally doesn't remove the struggle, it helps you navigate through it without losing your essence. The inner ally reminds you that you are not your circumstances. You are not the rejections, the failures, or the mistakes. You are the awareness that observes them, learns from them, and continues to rise despite them. When the world turns its back, this voice stays. When doubt clouds your mind, it cuts through the fog. When your heart breaks, it whispers that the pieces are still yours to rebuild. Learning to trust this inner companion is the most important relationship you will ever develop. Because at the end of every day, it is you who must face your reflection. And in that reflection lies your most reliable friend, the one who never leaves, never betrays, and never stops believing that you can transform even your darkest moments into the light that guides you forward. And every human being carries two worlds within. The one they show to others, and the one they keep hidden. The hidden world is filled with the parts we deny, repress, or fear to face. It holds the anger we suppress, the jealousy we pretend not to feel, the shame we bury, and the desires we call unacceptable. This hidden realm is what many refer to as the shadow. Shadow work is the courageous act of turning toward the darkness instead of running from it, not to destroy it, but to understand and integrate it. From childhood, we are taught which emotions are good and which are bad. We learn to smile when we're sad, to stay quiet when we're angry, to be polite when we want to scream. Over time, we build a mask, a socially acceptable version of ourselves. Behind that mask, our authentic feelings are pushed into the unconscious, forming the shadow. But what we repress does not disappear, it waits. It finds subtle ways to express itself through mood swings, projections, addictions, and self-sabotage. The more we reject our shadow, the more power it gains over us. Shadow work begins the moment you decide to stop blaming the world and start looking inward. It requires brutal honesty and deep compassion. It's not about labeling parts of yourself as evil or broken. It's about recognizing that everything you've buried once had a purpose. Your anger was a boundary that was never allowed expression. Your fear was a survival instinct. Your pride was a shield for an unhealed wound. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your unintegrated self asking for attention. When you start doing shadow work, the first stage often feels like chaos. Old memories resurface, emotional triggers intensify, and your perception of yourself begins to shift. You start seeing the ways you've hidden behind perfectionism, how you've projected your insecurities onto others, how you've disguised pain as confidence. It's uncomfortable because the ego, the identity you've built, begins to crumble. The ego wants to maintain the illusion of control, but the shadow demands truth. It pulls you into the depths of your own psyche, where light and dark exist together, inseparable and necessary. To meet your shadow is to meet your raw humanity. It's realizing that the things you judge in others are often reflections of what you refuse to see in yourself. The people who irritate you the most are usually mirrors showing you something unresolved within. That's why shadow work requires awareness in daily interactions. Every irritation, every emotional reaction, every repeated pattern is an invitation to ask, what is this showing me about myself? The external world becomes a reflection of the internal world, guiding you toward integration. True healing begins when you stop trying to destroy the shadow and start listening to it. The shadow doesn't need to be erased, it needs to be understood. Beneath every negative emotion lies a message. Anger may reveal injustice, envy may expose unmet desires, fear may highlight the edges of your growth. When you bring awareness to these emotions, instead of judging them, they lose their destructive power and become sources of wisdom. Shadow work transforms emotional pain into psychological insight. But this process demands patience. The shadow has been repressed for years, even decades. It will not reveal itself all at once. It comes forward in fragments, through dreams, triggers, memories, and symbols. The more you face it, the more it begins to trust you. The inner dialogue shifts from confrontation to cooperation. You stop seeing yourself as divided, good versus bad, light versus dark, and start realizing that wholeness includes both. Integration doesn't mean you'll never feel anger or fear again. It means those emotions no longer control your actions unconsciously. The practice of shadow work also dismantles the illusion of superiority. It humbles you. It reminds you that every person carries pain and contradictions. The arrogance of judgment fades because you begin to see the shared human struggle beneath every behavior. Compassion grows naturally from this awareness. When you accept your own imperfections, you stop expecting perfection from others. You relate to people not from the surface of identity, but from the depth of understanding. In shadow work, solitude becomes sacred. Silence becomes a mirror. You begin spending time with your emotions instead of escaping them. Journaling, meditation, dream analysis, and self-reflection become tools of excavation. You dig beneath every reaction and ask, what wound is this protecting? Each insight brings a piece of yourself back home. Slowly, the hidden parts that once caused pain begin to offer guidance. The shadow, once feared, becomes a teacher of authenticity. Shadow work is not a linear path. Some days you feel liberated, other days you feel lost. But the purpose is not to reach perfection, it's to become real. to embrace the fullness of who you are without shame, to walk through your inner darkness and discover that it was never meant to destroy you, only to reveal the depth of your light. From the moment we are born, we begin absorbing the expectations of others. Parents, teachers, friends, society, all shape us through subtle and direct messages about who we should be. We learn early that approval equals safety. If we act in ways that please others, we are rewarded with love, praise, and belonging. If we act against those expectations, we are met with rejection, disappointment, or silence. Slowly, without realizing it, we begin building a version of ourselves that exists not for authenticity, but for acceptance. Individuation begins the moment we recognize this pattern and dare to step outside it. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from who the world told you to be. It's not rebellion for the sake of defiance. It's awakening for the sake of wholeness. When you choose individuation over approval, you make a radical decision to trade comfort for truth, validation for self-respect, and imitation for self-realization. Most people never make that trade. They spend their lives perfecting the persona that earns applause, even if it costs them their soul. The path of individuation is not glamorous. It begins in confusion and solitude. You start noticing how much of your identity has been shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of being misunderstood. You begin to see how your choices were never entirely yours. The career you pursued, the relationships you maintained, even your opinions, all subtly designed to fit into the mold of acceptability. To individuate means to question everything you've been conditioned to believe about success, love, morality, and purpose. It means dismantling the borrowed voices in your mind until your own voice emerges. The danger of living for approval is that it creates dependence. You become addicted to recognition. Your emotions rise and fall with the reactions of others. You silence your truth to protect your image. You smile when you're hurting, agree when you disagree, and conform even when your intuition screams for freedom. Approval feels good in the moment, but it leaves a hollow echo in your soul. Individuation, on the other hand, often feels painful at first because it strips away that comfort. Yet within that pain lies liberation, the freedom of being real, even if it costs you admiration. Individuation demands that you face the inner conflict between belonging and authenticity. Every human being longs for connection, but true connection can only exist when you show up as yourself. Approval gained through performance is not belonging. It's conditional acceptance. It forces you to fragment yourself, to hide your depth behind a mask of likability. The moment you remove that mask, some people will drift away. That loss is not failure, it's alignment. You are shedding the relationships that were built on illusion, making room for those who can meet your truth. The process of individuation also involves confronting the shadow of conformity. This means acknowledging the ways you've betrayed your own integrity just to be seen as good. Maybe you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Maybe you followed a path that felt wrong because it was respected by others. Each act of self-betrayal leaves an invisible scar, a quiet erosion of your authenticity. To individuate is to stop apologizing for your difference and start honoring it as your greatest strength. As you walk this path, you begin to understand that approval is fragile, but authenticity is enduring. People's opinions shift with time and circumstance. The same crowd that praises you today might criticize you tomorrow. If your worth depends on that external approval, you'll live in constant fear of losing it. Individuation removes that fear by grounding your value in your essence, not your image. You stop needing to prove yourself because you start knowing yourself. This inner knowing changes the way you live. You make choices based on alignment rather than expectation. You begin speaking truth even when your voice shakes. You create not to impress, but to express. You no longer chase the illusion of being understood by everyone, because you understand yourself deeply enough to stand alone when necessary. This is the quiet confidence that replaces the endless hunger for validation. But individuation is not isolation. It doesn't mean rejecting connection. It means purifying it. When you no longer seek approval, your relationships become more genuine. You stop performing, and others feel safe to do the same. You begin to attract people who resonate with your real energy, not your edited version. The connections that remain are rooted in mutual respect, not dependency. Choosing individuation over approval is not a single decision. It's a lifelong process of remembering yourself. Again and again, you will be tempted to compromise your truth for acceptance. Again and again, you must return to your inner center. Each return deepens your authenticity and strengthens your self-trust. Individuation is the art of belonging to yourself so completely that the world's approval becomes optional. Not essential pain is the great teacher no one asks for, but everyone eventually meets. It arrives uninvited through loss, rejection, failure, or betrayal, and it reshapes everything it touches. When pain enters, it strips away illusion, security, and control. It exposes the raw truth beneath the surface, forcing you to confront the reality of who you are and what truly matters. For most, pain feels like destruction, yet hidden within its devastation is the seed of transformation. Turning pain into purpose is not about erasing suffering. It's about discovering what that suffering is trying to awaken within you. Every wound carries a message. The disappointment that broke your spirit once whispered something about your expectations. The heartbreak that shattered your trust revealed something about your attachment. The failure that crushed your confidence pointed toward something about your identity. Pain is not random. It's symbolic. It appears where something in you needs to evolve. The problem is that most people respond to pain by running from it, numbing it, or projecting it onto others. But unprocessed pain doesn't disappear. It becomes part of your shadow, influencing your thoughts, choices, and emotions from beneath the surface. Transformation begins when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That simple shift turns suffering into inquiry. Pain then becomes a doorway to understanding rather than a prison of resentment. The purpose of pain is to make you conscious. Conscious of what you value, what you ignore, and what you've been pretending not to feel. It drags your hidden truths to the surface so that you can no longer live unconsciously. Pain may shatter your comfort, but it also awakens your awareness. Turning pain into purpose requires courage because it means walking through the fire of your emotions instead of avoiding them. It means letting yourself feel the grief, anger, or despair fully, not to drown in it, but to understand its source. Every emotion has intelligence. Grief reveals love that had no space to express itself. Anger reveals boundaries that were crossed. Shame reveals the places where you have mistaken your worth for your mistakes. When you listen to the voice beneath the pain, you begin to extract meaning from suffering, and that meaning becomes the foundation of purpose. Pain is not just personal, it's transformative energy waiting to be redirected. When you process it consciously, it turns into empathy, creativity, and wisdom. Many of the world's most powerful creations, works of art, philosophies, movements, were born from the ashes of pain. The artist who lost everything learns to paint what the soul feels. The teacher who was once broken learns to guide others through the same darkness. The healer who suffered deeply becomes a safe place for others to rest. This is the alchemy of pain, turning what once wounded you into what now serves others. But before pain can become purpose, it must first be accepted. You cannot transform what you still resist. As long as you deny or minimize your suffering, it controls you. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It means acknowledgement. It means saying, yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt. That moment of honest acknowledgement begins to release the energy locked inside the wound. Only then can you shape it into something constructive. Pain that is repressed becomes poison. Pain that is accepted becomes power. Turning pain into purpose also demands a change in identity. When you go through deep suffering, a part of your old self dies. The version of you that was naive, comfortable, or dependent. The new self that emerges carries scars, but those scars are symbols of strength. They remind you that what once felt like an ending was actually a beginning. The more you integrate what pain has taught you, the less it defines you. You stop identifying as a victim of your experiences and start recognizing yourself as the author of your healing. Purpose born from pain is not about revenge or justification. It's about contribution. It's about transforming your suffering into something that brings light, understanding, or comfort to others. When you help someone through a struggle you've already faced, your pain finds meaning. When you use your lessons to build, create, or inspire, your suffering becomes sacred. Pain loses its grip the moment it serves something greater than itself. There will be moments when pain still feels heavy, when its lessons are not yet clear. That's part of the process. Purpose does not appear overnight. It unfolds as you keep walking through the unknown with awareness. Every time you choose to respond with understanding instead of bitterness, every time you use your wound as a bridge rather than a wall, you are shaping your pain into purpose. Pain may have broken something within you, but it also revealed the power that can rebuild it stronger, clearer, and more compassionate than before.